Madelaine, welcome. It's really great to be here with you. I'd just like to second very briefly before we kick off. The lands that I come to you from, the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples. I've lived in Melbourne on a number of occasions and feel very grateful to learn a lot more about this incredibly rich ecological and human history. And so I feel very grateful to be a participant in the unfolding story of these lands and want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So today's session, as I think we've probably done in each of the five incarnations of this AI and the Planet series, is going to be different yet again, and I think beautifully so. Um, Madeleine, perhaps we can start with just a little bit of an introduction to you and how you got to where you are now, your academic career, the kind of like pathway that you've taken, and the things that are, enlivening your living inquiry at present. And then, as Philippa said, let's give ourselves a good 20 minutes to get into some dialogue before we have everyone else join in.
Okay. Thank you both for the introduction and thank you for everyone joining. It's an early morning here, and but I'm happy to be here. So thank you. I think I could give you a bio, right? Like that's how we often start with with these talks. And I could give you my credentials and these sorts of things, and maybe we'll get there, but I want to start with a story, I think is the best way. When I first went to university, I was coming from this house actually. I'm back in the house I grew up in. So I'm in the countryside in rural Canada. And then I moved to Toronto. So it was like country girl moves to a big city. Pretty overwhelming, but also very fun. And one of the things that was overwhelming is I found myself in classes of one class was 1,000 students, another was 500, 300, 200. And I felt really, I mean, understandably overwhelmed by the size of everything. But I kept going to class, kept going to class, but I actually ended up dropping out. So I go on to, spoiler alert, I go on to get my PhD in the ethics of technology, specializing in AI and robotics. But it was the ethics class in my undergraduate degree as a 19-year-old that I dropped. That was the final straw of my first year of university, and I dropped out. And I dropped out because there was this spirit of dehumanization within the system that was the university. And in the ethics class, I saw the professor draw on the board some sort of a formula for how we might treat each other. I'm guessing, now that I know a little more, I'm guessing this was a utilitarian kind of maybe what is now understood as effective altruism formula, some sort of math equation for how to do good and how to do less bad. And I looked at the board. There's a chalkboard in those days. I looked at the board and I just thought, like, get me out of here. What are we doing? How can we have this sort of sterile formula for how we're treating one another, for the messiness and intimacy of that? And so I bartended for a few years, eventually went back to school and went on to have a PhD, as I said, in the ethics of technology. Along a winding road we don't need to go into, but what I've always been drawn into in my work in this field is how can we move from that sterile um, ethics? How can we move from these abstract frameworks and include the real intimacy and feeling and textures of what our lives are within the ethics conversation? So when I meet you today, I think because this is the AI and the planet, what I'm working on now is looking at the ecological aspects of technologies like AI and robotics, and I'm writing a book on robots now. But we all know the global supply chain. Like we everybody on this call, we get the systems that make these technologies. It's global. It's big. So what I'm interested in is like, okay, we know that. We know that in an abstract way, in a like how do we know that? Yeah, an abstract way, we in an intellectual way, but are there ways that we can also um, feel that? Are there other ways of connecting other than just looking at maybe a map of a supply chain? So I think I'll leave us there.
Yeah, cool. I mean, bartending can be fun, right?
Yeah.
that's a nice little interlude, and you get lots of feelings. Some feelings nice, some feelings not so nice, depending on how
Yes.
people are behaving. Uh,
Yeah.
but thank you for that, Madeleine. A couple of things like I remember when we first connected, one of the things that I loved most about how you were describing this complex and messy process of ethics as being or having the potential to be beautiful. And that deeply resonated with me because as someone that's been doing ethics in the real world as you know, quote unquote, governments, corporations, etc., for 15 odd years now, that's not the thing that people tend to think of when they're like, "Hey, the ethicist is coming." They normally think I'm coming in with a stick, you know. It's not really my approach. And so I was like, "Yes, that's cool. I would love to learn more about that." And so I'd really like to talk to you about kind of like beauty aesthetics and how that feeds into your work potentially. But there's another component to what you suggested that I think is worth maybe beginning with, if you don't mind. And it's that. Um, so were you at UT or which uni were you at?
Yeah, U of T.
Are you pretty familiar with John Vervaeke's work?
I'm somewhat familiar, so I can't get like into the weeds on it, but I know a little bit about it.
Okay, well, because I'm thinking he has this is it I'm not even sure what I'd really call it. Maybe just framework loosely that describes different ways of knowing or different forms of
Yeah.
knowledge, propositional, perspectival, procedural, and participatory. And so we're a very propositionally weighted culture or civilization. Um,
Hmm.
and there are different ways in which we could describe that, facts, beliefs, etc. I mean, but what's it like to participate in a process? What does it feel like? Like, how do you use your hands? Like, you know, there's all these other ways of being that are truths of our I don't know, our evolutionary unfolding that I think there's something there that maybe we could explore. But the other part is like if I just go to sort of the philosophy of cog-sci for a moment, you take like 4E cognition, it's like, okay, well, this whole like thinking feeling divide that's like pitched as a bit of a binary thing, it just doesn't seem to be true.
Hmm.
um, you know, thinking and feeling like seem to be deeply interrelated.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, like, when you're doing this work, uh, and I don't know if you're allowed to give anything away about the book, but when you're doing this work, trying to bring more beauty to the process of ethics, or trying to help us become affective participants in um, the reality of our socio-technical society, are there specific theoretical frames that you're drawing from? And if so, could you maybe give us a little bit of an insight into what that looks like?
Mm. Yes. Oh, there's so much in this question. So, yeah, the it's the best way to go about this. Okay, I'm gonna flip it. I'm gonna flip it because we'll get to the theory and the framework to ground us. But it often in when we're talking about ethics, so I've taught ethics for a number of years to students in their humanities bachelors, and then later the engineers in their bachelors and their masters, and supervising master students as well. And then everybody else on this call as well, is that I would encourage you and invite you is that we need not cling to a theory. You need not cling to a framework. You have all the ethical wisdom within you. Not to say you can't learn, not to say you can't expand, not to say that different perspectives aren't going to um, reshape and how you perceive the world. And hopefully we can get into perception. But ethicists often come in and say, think this way. Here are the three things you need to think about. But you already know. Like we're at a civilized, I have come to believe we're at a species level, civilizational, well, not civilizational, bigger species level, planetary shift. And I don't think you need a theory to know that, because you know if your kids or your grandchildren are speaking to you in a totally different way. Are they getting their information in a totally different way? Are they asking you or their family members or their community members? Or are they asking ChatGPT? we're 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 animals, like we're species, we're meant to like be in a herd and speak to one another and learn from each other, not only through words but through touch, through our bodies moving around with one another. And I would be shocked if everybody in this call didn't already see these sort of shifts that are happening. So I start with that, but I will tell you some theory. Yes, I can't help it. Yeah, so my supervisor in my PhD is Sabina Rosa, and she is a wonderful technology ethicist. And she talks about how there is, as you say, Nate, there's these distinctions that we hold many, many distinctions that shape I believe, our very perception, but are not in line with what we maybe feel inside, which is that rational thinking and emotional thinking are separate. And Sabina Rosser says, like, yeah, right. It's yeah, right. Like emotions are so important part of our moral knowing. And she works on nuclear waste sites and interviews people who live around in that area. And their anger, is this not ethical wisdom? Their anger over their place and their community. The poet David White talks about anger as how does he say it more beautifully than I'll do it now? But he talks about how anger is this
Our
it's
deepest
something.
care, effectively.
What is it?
He says anger is our deepest form of care.
Oh, I mean, so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
I was
deeper form of
listening to
care.
David on the way to the call, on the way.
Oh, that's
Funny.
convenient.
Yeah.
So and in that essay or the those short pieces, he talks about how it's also when something is being transgressed, some line is being crossed, right? How wise is that? Our emotions, our joys, our griefs, all of these matter so much when we're talking about technology. We're responding to our, and let those be also rational. And then also, I fit within a context of post phenomenology. It's taken me a long time to sort of come to that realization like, right, I'm a post phenomenologist. And
Oh
maybe
no,
some,
another label. God damn it.
I know. I'm like, I know, but it feels better when you put in like five different labels and then you feel like you're a bit of a constellation at least. So, so the post phenomenology, in a sentence, is an an expansion of phenomenology. Phenomenology is a study of philosophy that looks at that works from lived experience. What's our experience? What's our very perception of moving around in the world? So you can see here, I was already talking about like abstract frameworks. This tries to get away from abstract frameworks and what are we really knowing when we're in the world? And post phenomenology, the post here is different than some other posts. Some posts say like we're done with that. Post phenomenology says, let's keep phenomenology and expand it to take seriously that technology is interwoven with humanity. Humanity is interwoven with technology, and it shapes our very way of moving around in the world. So it takes technology not as an added part of understanding humans, but as a central, foundational part of our moving around in the world. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, nice. Cool. And I think one of the other things that maybe we briefly spoke about the last time we chatted, Madeline, was just the arts. And it certainly makes sense where you've kind of ended up in terms of your situatedness and how you're approaching a lot of this. Like maybe I can play a little bit of that back. So one of the things that we're both probably quite familiar with, and maybe many others on the call are familiar with, is this claim that many a philosopher have made that there's no role for emotion in ethics or the process of ethical reflection, deliberation, and decision making. Um, and I think that there's very good reason, and it sounds like you think there's very good reason to suggest that that's preposterous. Like, emotions are signals that have emerged, through this process of complexification, this evolutionary process that we're part of, to tell us something, to encourage us to inquire or act. Um, and if we forego those entirely in some decisional context, um, it seems like we're selling ourselves very short. Now, I've attempted over the
Mm-hmm.
describe a bunch of fancy ways to get at that, so that it's uh, appetizing for those that I'm having the discourse with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of folks in like everyday life go, no, like I feel angry. Like, where's that coming from? Now, sometimes the anger might be like a form of self-deception, or it's a surface level thing, and actually there's a deep sadness or grief or wound that exists below it, right? Or there's some conditioning, but it's ultimately an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
I think if, many people on the call might be familiar with David White, but if you're not familiar with David's Constellations and Consolations too, I mean, eat your heart out. Like it's it's pretty good stuff. Um, very grateful. I listened to David years and years ago, and then my partner got me back onto him. She said to me, and I remember this very distinctively one night, she goes, he speaks the language of my soul. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to get back into David now. So that's quite the claim.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so in this sort of, I'm really glad that you were able to tease out the specific meaning of post there, because a little bit to sort of like pre-modern, modern, post-modern, meta
Mm-hmm.
type thing that we may be familiar with in other contexts. When you're engaged, maybe we can make this super practical, Madeline. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say we were going to go into some group context, and that could be an organization or an institution, it could be a community, it could be a school, it could be a university. And you were tasked with creating some type of participatory context through which the folks that make that community or group or institution or whatever what it is, um, or rather create, I don't know, like favorable conditions for them to start learning this stuff the way that you want them to learn this stuff, as in like about materiality, about these false divides or these false binaries. Like what would you do with people to help them start learning this stuff? Like, yeah, like I'm super fascinated in how you would approach something like that. And maybe I make it even, let's say you're going into a company, just to make it super concrete. Like you're going into a company and they're, oh my God, AI everything, because like FOMO. And you go, why AI? And they're like, don't ask that. And then, but like that's the context. So you got to go into a company and they're not in the world that you're in right now, at least not when they've got their work hat on, at least not predominantly. What would you do? How would you support them to take them on a journey towards maybe embodying a more fulsome sort of like set of their dispositions or capacities in order to interface with this current moment in time and these transitions and these processes in a different way.
Mm, yeah. Um, well, again, we come back to this idea that I've already said, and you're pointing at too, which is that there's a false dichotomy. Okay, so there's this rational thinking that we might put like optimization and linear in this bucket. And then we have emotional, wispy, cyclical, this kind of thinking over here. I see that really commonly in the discourse these days. I don't think those are separate. Maybe the theme is, maybe on my tombstone it should just say, I don't think those are separate. um, we're all we all are no, let me say this a different way. Emotions are woven into all of our movements. It's not to say that everything's only emotional at the very bottom of it. I'm not trying to get to the bottom of it. It's a tapestry. It's not like all in a row. And so emotions are woven into everything. Now, what I did was when I was working with students, and then I also have a ethics consultancy company now, is what I do is I try to slow things down with the intellectual. I find it like there's like this real physicality to it. It's like your brain is in this real high cognitive functioning mode, and there's a real narrowness, and it's almost like everything's up here. And so what I try to do is I just try to slow things down. And this is tricky too, because we hear about slowing down all the time as if it's an end point, as if it's the goal. Slowing down, it's nice. And it's also a place that allows our sensitivities all over our body, not just in the mind or the brain, I should say, physically the brain. But it allows our sensitivities and our intuitions to become a little bit more sensitive to the many options that are vying for our attention. And so what happens is that when I'm working with people, I often will get called in if there's already something gone wrong. That's when an ethicist comes in. Like shit has already hit the fan. Or it's when uh, there's a real yearning within a company for something more beautiful, as you're talking about, Nate, more beautiful. We'll get to the word beauty in a moment. So that means there's already something stirring around. Like we already got some juice flowing. In which case, what I do is, and I'm trained in like, I guess I'm going to call it spiritual care, contemplative care, is I just sit with people. I don't start with a PowerPoint. I don't start with a framework. I sit with people because what I already said is I hold, I really have a big, I have a like a very strong belief in this is that we already have a lot of wisdom about technology and how it's shaping our lives. And so when we sit with people and let things come out, not in a 15-minute meeting, nothing's coming out in 15 minutes.
Everyone's 7 minutes late too. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. If you can go for a walk, that's better.
for sure.
Yeah. If you can share a meal, if you can walk to a meal, poof, now we're talking. Okay. Things are unfolding. I think another speaker you had was speaking about nervous system. It's a nervous system like, and what's happening is this is like a part of this training I have in contemplative care, is that the person in front that I'm with is actually being recognized. I'm not coming in and saying like, "Oh, you need to worry about privacy and this and transparency and you need to do this." It's like, "Hey, what's going on here? What's up? What's up?" And amazingly, even though you have people who you might really fundamentally think on paper you disagree with, well, rip the paper up because when you sit with a person What are they, why do they want to reorganize things to optimize to blah, blah, blah? It's because usually there's some fundamental motivation, like paying their bills that I share as well, or giving their kids an opportunity. And it's hard here because I might go into cliches about like all the fundamental things that people like or people are motivated by. But there are these, I don't look at people who are trying to implement AI and how much it costs the planet and how much it costs each other in our relationships and think they're bad people. I think what happens is you sit together and everybody unfolds into their complexity, and that's where I like to meet people. So it's slow.
Yeah, like I'm really interested in there are so many organizational settings in which what you're describing is so horrendously needed, but the affordance is not there at all. Um,
Yes.
and so finding the moments to enter and and the right context through which to enter, like these are really important things. And I'm entirely with you. Like I'm trained in philosophical counseling as well,
Yeah.
Madelaine. And I noticed that a huge amount of my applied ethics work, and whenever we're doing applied ethics, we're also doing ontological and epistemological and axiological stuff because they're all, in a Baradian kind of sense, it's like an
Mm.
ethico-onto-epistemology type thing plus the rest. Um, but the counseling component feels really, really important. And I think there's just bringing in the nervous system stuff, like, so I think that the most of like if you think about the state of our civilization right now, it's all limbic. It's all limbic. Um, it's like a big daddy amygdala, and he's very angry and very scared, probably because of wounds when he was a little boy. And there's not a lot of sort of like prefrontal action. That's one thing. So the processes that we describe as reasoning or rational thought, or someone's like, yeah, but look at it strategically or whatever. I don't actually think there's a huge amount of that Trumpism. I wasn't necessarily suggesting
Mm.
um, Trump, but that might be an incarnation of what I'm sort of getting at, a caricature of what I'm getting at. Um, so I don't think there's a lot of what we even say we think there is in a lot
Mhm.
of these organizations. I think there's a lot of reactionary thinking. I think there's a lot of reductionist thinking. I think there's a lot of these types of things. What you're describing, Madeline, I think is so important because like think about the if we were to measure the nervous system dynamics of you in the creative act. So let's say I don't know what arts you're involved in, but like let's say it was painting. Let's say you're an absolute
Mhm.
painter. Maybe you are. I don't know. I'm going to reveal something to us in just a moment.
No.
But the and let's just say we didn't look at the entire nervous system. We actually just looked at the brain, and we were just basically looking at blood flow and electrical signaling and stuff like that, like fMRI type thing. Um, and what we would see in the brain there, and I'm not suggesting brain is sort of like the necessary and sufficient condition for mind and all that, but like just in the brain, um, would be profoundly different to what we see in a corporate boardroom, like profoundly.
Mm.
And I had this moment today with a colleague where outside of, we would, he was doing an assessment and it's part of my job, like an ethics assessment, it's part of my job to help coach him through that process. Um, and we had a moment sort of outside of that that was really wonderful, talking about some bigger picture things that was helping situate his perspective on the process of applied ethics that he was doing. And it felt a bit like one of the counseling sessions that I would do. Not explicitly,
Mm.
it just really naturally emerged. There was an openness and a curiosity and a humility. We were seeing, hearing, and valuing each other. Um, and there was this moment where his entire perspective on something shifted, and it was really significant. And like this was through intermediated via satellite, and it was like I could feel it, like it was huge. Something really profound happened. Um, So before we get to questions, I'm wondering now, we're all obsessed in organizations of all kinds, quantifying everything we can. We often don't realize what quantification is, in fact, like point in time approximation of real world phenomena, and then it's like map's not the territory stuff, but we typically treat the map as the territory. So there's lots of mistakes that we make there. But let's just say you were to go into an organization the way that you described, and that it was afforded for you and the other participants to slow down a bit, and you were able to see, hear, and value each other. You were able to meet each other in a very different context. Is there is there a way of describing, not necessarily metrics, but is there a way of describing
Mm,
what the story of good looks like as that sort of unravels and unfolds, and new properties within this sort of superorganism that is the organization start emerging? Like, do you have a sense of what good kind of looks like? Is there a particular sort of set of properties that you're looking for or attuning to try and be like we're moving in a really good direction here? Like what does good look like in that sort of context?
mm, mm. Yeah. As an ethicist, it's interesting. As an ethicist, I'm exploring this idea of how do we move, how can you have ethics without a moral compass? This is a provocative statement that I'm working through in the book, but how do we not tie ourselves to good and bad, wrong and right? So I'm not looking for good. Um, I think unfolding is the right piece. Unfolding. And I think what I'm going to say is that sometimes what we have is, you pointed to it anyways in this question, which is that um, sometimes, especially with a lot of systems thinking lately, and we'll think like, okay, we'll map out. I'll do a bunch of interviews and I'll sit with everybody and I'll understand how they're feeling and then I'll map it out and then I will synthesize it. And I do write a report at the end, but it's not really like a report that is exactly like a normal report. There's usually poetry in there and philosophy, and it's meant to inspire people. So I do write a report, but um, I'm not interested in mapping everything out within because within an organization, because what happens with this systems theory and holistic thinking is that you have a sense that you can understand the whole, that you can understand the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so so what I'm interested in something called, and I'll maybe end on this note, which I think will answer your question, is that there's something I call it's actually my mom's phrase, but it's this practice called creative loitering. Creative loitering. And loitering is hanging around, and at least in a North American context, you're not supposed, it says no loitering. No hanging around out front of shops and out on the street corners or something like this. No loitering because it's dangerous. Okay, so if we take it also as a metaphor, it is dangerous in this highly optimized, predictable world that we're being corralled into. Because when we're predictable, we are controllable. Hmm? And creative loitering is something of a revolutionary act and fun.
Great combo.
Create,
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. So creative loitering is to be able to hang around and see, what's this glimmer over here? I'm gonna follow that. I'm gonna follow this. And it might be your intuition and your emotions, but let's not get too narrowed in on the individual, as if we're individuals at all. I mean, like we're something, but I don't think we're individuals. Like you can see the outside of me, but my skin is porous. I am made of a zillion microbes. I'm more of a current in the sea than a discrete object. And so in this act of creative loitering, of going around and just listening and following a conversation, a tidbit, a falling leaf, you're 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 allowing that there are systems beyond us, that there's wisdom and intellect beyond my own brain or the human brain. There's a humbling to say to just roll the shoulders down, take an exhale, and know that we're just one species on the planet. We're not the only one. We're probably an important one, but not maybe more important than anyone else. And so creative loitering is like allowing this conversation. I think David White talks about this as like a living conversation and living like that with the world instead of having conversations with your LLM in your computer all the time. And so this creative loitering, if I see that, that's like a little bit more of this. I don't have the science on this, but I have the experience. I think everybody else does. It's like when you are experiencing art and beauty, your heart, there's a sh like when you listen to like just think of your favorite song. Maybe you're like if you can't remember recently you've done this, but as a teenager you're like driving in the car and just like your favorite song comes on. And the emotions that go with that, your heart is open. That's like that artist opening, and in that create that's such a creative place. You don't need to be a painter, you don't need to be a writer, you don't need to be an actor. Everybody has that experience of opening through art and through beauty to be able to step into the creative conversation, creative loitering. So it's something everybody can do. After you get off this call, just give it a little practice.
Nice. Creative loitering. I love that.
Hmm.
Philippa, I know we went a little over as you know the this is not the type of thing that deserves to be a 15-minute meeting. It deserves to be um, an expression of the conversational nature of reality, to put it in that sort of
Hmm.
Whitean term. I was thinking though, when you're talking, Madelaine, very briefly, I was like, I wonder if Alfred North Whitehead was here, would he say even referring to you is a fallacy of misplaced concreteness? I'm not sure, but I don't, there's so many. Anyways,
That's good.
that's a philosopher's joke. Maybe it's not that funny. Philippa, over to you. Would love to, yeah, see if there are some questions that the folks on the call have for Madelaine, given all that has been discussed. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both. I'm really drawn to Maggie's comment actually, which is about AI becoming something like a planetary nervous system, distributed sensing, integrating and responding. And so she says that if we think about AI in that sense, we need to consider the kind of sensitivity we're building into the world's new sensory layer. And I'm just wondering, Madelaine, if you want to respond to that at all.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. I don't know if Maggie, if you're still there, can you tell us more about that? I don't know. It's always risky if somebody has a camera off. Okay. Um, Pop in Maggie if you are. The um yeah, I'm into that idea. There's a few things because it is this global infrastructure, and as we all know, we humans and our emotions and our politics and our dreams and our aspirations and our griefs are all in the AI system. Now, and um, there's also this predominance of a Silicon Valley type way of thinking, way of seeing the world, way of gendering the world, way of looking at politics and free speech. We know that's like this particular culture is infused within the global culture, which is also probably an example of what happens not just with AI, but within TV and music and things as well. But I do like this idea of not just focusing, not just settling on the dominance part, but actually looking in the margins and seeing what else is coming up and like sensing and creating sense within a global system. And that's all the workers that put together the AI systems. That's with the software, but also the materiality. If you touch your computer right now, I guess all of us have computers or a phone. If you touch your computer right now, actually do it, like touch it. Um, this is an amalgamation of the planet, like of materials, of minerals, of it feels smooth. It's the earth. And so, and from somewhere else, right? So in that way, I really like that idea of not just saying like AI is bad or AI is good, and how can we make it more good or less bad, but let's like just leave that conversation aside and see what kind of amalgamation and sensorial and sensing, yeah, I think Maggie said, um, is alive within the system as well. That's really interesting.
I'm conscious of time because we're almost at past, but I just want to bring in so that Maggie can see the recording because she had to leave a couple of her comments at the end, which just qualify her comment. She's brought in the notion of trauma. So talking about we're building the planet's nervous system in real time, but from the record of human history, which is a traumatic human history.
Yes, the way that I don't know if people know about fractals, but the way that the fractals is a natural phenomenon that happens with ferns, broccoli, some trees, where patterns are repeated over time. So the shape of a fern is actually in the leaf shape, but also the patterns of the veins on the leaf, and so on, all the way to the microscopic level, all the way up to the full fern. Same with broccoli. And I am very interested in fractals. So what we have at the top with AI that we see as we're just using it throughout our daily life, how does that go all the way to the beginning of the life cycle and the death cycle and the in between the life and death cycle of AI? And when you go back, it is extraction is not a strong enough word. It doesn't hold enough of the violence in it. It is a violent beginning. It is a horrific death in e-waste sites, waiting for who knows how long, um, leading to horrible deaths and miscarriages for everybody who lives nearby. How can we expect the middle part of the life, the AI in the middle that we all use, or some of us use, I should say, to be good with all of that on either side, with no reverence for the earth, with no reverence for the people who brought this technology into being that we all apparently rely on. So, yes, I think the nervous system of the AI and the planet are interlinked. And um, to change it into a way that is more caring for life in its many forms on the planet would would require something. When we talk about trauma, we're often talking about like getting deep down into our own nervous systems and how complex those are. Well, what if we thought of that like on a global supply chain level, on a planetary level? How could we even create this technology um, in a regulated way? Maybe, but I think reverence is one of the ways that we could, reverence for the material, reverence for the people, all the way along would be a big change.
Amazing. Thank you, Madelaine. I just wanted to see if there are any thoughts that either you or Nate have just to conclude our event for today.
Oh,
Nate, I'll pass that to you.
yeah, thanks, Madeline. I'll just say something very briefly. I'm deeply skeptical of the looseness with which we anthropomorphize. And if we had more time, I would very much like to get into, I think, significant differences between the current architecture of AI and AI systems and the human nervous system or any organism's nervous system. They're qualitatively very distinct. If we're doing this in a purely metaphorical way, there may actually be something really interesting there. And I think that's the poetic conversation that Madelaine is
Hmm.
having there with Maggie, who I don't think is on the call with us anymore. Across space-time, intermediated by satellite and all that. So that's something. But what Madelaine has just said there about the like life is a tragically beautiful process. I think it was Seneca that said something like, I can't remember the exact quote now off the top of my head. I don't know, Madelaine, if you can remember it, but something of it like, what's the point crying over a moment when the entirety of life is worthy of weeping? It's something like this. And and then I'm just going to ground this or round this out in some more David White, just because that's been a bit of a theme. Like David talks a lot about robust vulnerability. Like in order to live, we must die. And that seems to be true of the entire universe itself as well. If our best stories of what the universe is, its nature and function, are true-ish. Um, we don't know, but let's just go with that for now. That's our best sort of working body of knowledge. Um, we can't not be vulnerable. So how do we learn to more robustly inhabit that vulnerability? How do we take the courageous step? How do we go towards the difficulty? How do we not shy away from the tragedy that Madelaine has just described? Like if you're looking at the sort of like ecological, ethical dimensions of these unprecedented socio-technical systems, it's very hard to do that in the abstract. You have to go there and you have to feel it and you have to actually grieve. Like, I can't tell you how many moments I have throughout just a given week where I have to grieve for something, a future that won't be, um, a process that I've become aware of, something that is occurring in the world or something in my own life. Um, and I think we're really selling ourselves as a species short. We're selling what might well be this unique capacity that we have to be something like a custodial species. We're not that yet, but I believe that we have that potential. How can we possibly become what we have the potential to be if we aren't taking that courageous step and truly feeling all of it? And I'm not saying don't like there's joy and there's ecstasy, there's just everything. Like there's so much to life. But if we blunt ourselves to affect, if we shy away from our emotions, and most of that is, that it's not deliberate. This stuff happens typically when we're quite young. It's an attempt to cope with the world. It's organismic evolutionary intelligence playing out without any conscious involvement from us, right? But now that we're adults, I think we're all adults on this call, we have the capacity to become consciously aware of this stuff and begin exercising agency. But I think I truly believe so much of that requires the courage to go towards, like the picture that Madelaine painted there is genuinely tragic, like e-waste leading to, I'm about to cry right now, like miscarriages. It's like that's that's absolutely horrible.
Hmm.
And if we're not willing to feel that as expressions of life on this incredible interconnected planet, it's very unlikely we will do what is needed to progressively change the conditions of this life. Um, yeah, I didn't expect to end there. And I'll probably have to go have a nice cry after this, but for affording me that opportunity to speak from the heart.